There's just under a dozen Top Gun video games, and if you believe Wikipedia and the public in general, most of them are pretty terrible. Top Gun came out during the heyday of the NES, when consoles in general were just incapable of making a decent flight simulator. I mean, a Top Gun flight sim on Game Boy? I don't know if that's bold or stupid, but a Top Gun game on the GameCube? Well, hell yeah, there's absolutely no reason why this game should suck. Titus! Here's the weird thing. When I found this game at VStock, they had 2 copies of the game, and each had a different publisher's name on the box. One was from Titus, and one was from Mastiff, even though both games seemed to be identical. Mastiff went on to make their own Top Gun game for the Nintendo DS, so... whatever, who cares? Well, this is strange. Have you ever had a game that didn't display correctly unless you told it where the center of the screen was? This isn't even to fix the aspect ratio, it's just pointing to the middle of the screen. The game forces you through 5 training levels before they let you play the actual campaign. Oh god, please do not be rings. Please do not be rings. Oh please, not again, Titus. Oh thank god, no rings. Instead you're flying around shooting down balloons. The controls are pulled straight from Star Wars Rogue Leader. A shoots, B does secondary weapons, L and R brake and speed up. Hey, if you're gonna rip something off, at least rip off something good, right? The controls are responsive, and hey, so far this isn't half bad. The next level you're trying to shoot tanks with rockets that have no homing capabilities. Miss. 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 Shit, crashed into the ground. Getting a little more bad now. The next level is your first combat with other airplanes. These missiles won't hit dick, come on! Next you have to destroy a series of buildings, with nowhere near enough missiles to actually kill them, forcing you to rely on cannons. Ah! Shit! Would something hit the damn target? Yeah, this sucks. I think a good place to start digging through the shit pile is with the weapons. The game gives you a Gatling gun, which is weak but reliable, and 4 warheads that are varying degrees of useless. Your first weapon is air-to-air missiles, which only lock and home onto airborne targets. They'll reliably one-shot kill helicopters, but their tracking and maneuverability are so terrible that they'll never hit enemy planes unless you're directly behind one and it's flying straight away from you. Like any kind of angle between your 2 planes, and it just swerves off and hits nothing. Luckily, the AI is too dumb to so much as try to evade the missiles even if you get a clean shot, despite the missiles sucking so hard that it's piss easy to dodge when they fire at you. The second weapon is an air-to-ground missile, a homing missile that only locks onto ground-based targets. These damn missiles are less reliable than Ubisoft's quality control. Certain targets like anti-aircraft turrets and gunboats they can destroy just fine, but any target that's built too close to the ground like a tank or a building, it's complete total luck whether the missile actually hits it or not. Part of the problem is that the missiles move by swerving towards the ground and then pulling up to fly at your target horizontally, and the game's programming is so bad they have a tendency to just slam into the ground before they can pull up to track their targets. But even if they do track their target, for reasons that will forever baffle me, they often just explode on the empty ground 2 feet to the right of your target and don't do anything. None of the weapons do splash damage, so if the missile fails for whatever reason and doesn't land a direct hit, then nothing happens. I don't know if they're hitting the ground due to uneven terrain or what. All I know is these damn things only work on certain enemies, and it's 50-50 chance if they'll kill others. The third warhead you've got are rockets. They don't home or track enemies at all, they just go straight forward, and they're freaking useless. Just like the other weapons, these rockets have 0 splash damage. If you fire a rocket and it's not a dead center direct hit, nothing happens. And most of the ground enemies are so tiny you have no hope of lining up a clear shot with these rockets unless you get into point-blank range. And if you aren't aware of how planes and physics work, point-blank range on a ground-based target in a jet fighter is a really good way to crash and die. Actually killing something with the rockets requires seeing an enemy, determining how it's moving, and trying to calculate exactly where it will be by the time your rocket gets to it. Landing any kind of hit with these things requires getting close enough to the ground that you can easily crash and die on the terrain, and most of the time the graphics are so damn muddy that the tank or whatever you're shooting at will blend in with the ground. You can't freaking see it to line up a shot, and anything other than a direct hit doesn't do squat. I shit you not, the rockets are so beyond useless that the game actually gives you a skill shot bonus every time that you actually manage to kill something with them. Even the game can't believe that you're trying to use them. The last warhead you get is bombs, which work just like the proton bombs in Rogue Squadron. A cursor appears on the ground, you press B, and shit explodes. This is by far the most useful weapon for land-based enemies, so naturally you're only usually given 2 per level with no refills, maybe 4 if you're lucky. The bombs don't have enough splash damage to take out a ton of enemies at once, so the ridiculously small number they give you, it lets you take out like 2 or 3 land-based enemies out of dozens, and then you're empty. Plus, I swear this is true, if you're too high above the ground, the game has a nasty tendency to just glitch the bombs out of existence. There have been several times I've dropped a bomb directly onto a target and nothing happened. Not even an explosion from the bomb hitting the ground. It just vanished into the black hole. It'd be really great if you could select your own loadout, like get the feel for which weapon sucks the least and load up accordingly, but the game doesn't do that. Each level has a set-in-stone predetermined loadout that you have zero say in, so you always get the shaft on bombs, and you're often barely given enough secondary weapons to fire once on each enemy. So if too many of these ridiculously inaccurate weapons miss, you're forced to fall back on cannons, and this has led to missions where I had to start over repeatedly because I ran out of anti-ground weapons long before I ran out of ground enemies. My favorite part of this whole screwed up loadout system is that even the training mission for ground combat exposes how poorly programmed and useless the anti-ground weapons really are. The 4th training mission tests you with blowing up 10 bases. You can either destroy the 4 buildings around each base, or you can use the game's target switching function to take out the center building and destroy the base in one shot. The trouble is, you can try all damn day to take out those center buildings, none of your weapons will actually register a hit on them. For whatever reason, the only weapon that actually damages the center buildings are the bombs. I'm not convinced this is on purpose, and you're not given enough bombs to finish the level. Your weapons for ground targets are so useless against buildings, so incapable of hitting a large stationary target that I ended up having to use the cannons after I ran out of bombs because nothing else would frickin' land a hit. Trust me, this will become a much bigger problem later on. The campaign is split into 3 eras, and the first is just called Southeast Asia. There's a very heavy implication these levels are evacuating personnel and POWs after the Vietnam War, and the disguise is so paper thin it makes you wonder why not just call it Vietnam. Probably because the F-14 Tomcat historically never once fired on North Vietnamese troops, whereas you slaughter fleets of Viet Cong choppers and gunboats single-handed. The first real-world level is straightforward. Destroy the anti-aircraft cannons, choppers land, take out enemy helicopters, and then destroy the prison camps. The buildings are nice and big, so this isn't a problem. The second level is more of the same, only now you're blowing up gunboats. It's the same deal. Clear out the forces, protect the choppers, and bomb the base. Only this time I have a little more trouble. See, when the game tasks you with blowing up a base, it means you have to destroy every single solitary building on the base. This includes the tiny-ass guard huts, the tinier-ass control buildings, and the even tinier-ass storage buildings, and kill all this shit with weapons that barely hit targets 3 times their size. I fly at the buildings, I lock on with the air-to-ground missiles, and oh look, nothing happens! When I run low on missiles or don't feel like wasting anymore, I switch to rockets, and oh look, they don't do anything either! And I'm not doing this to make a spiteful point about how worthless the weapons are. This is me trying to play the freaking game, trying to blow up these damn buildings so I can go home and the damn things won't explode. I'm out of bombs, so eventually I just resolved that I'm going to have to take these things out with cannons, which entails flying straight at the target, firing blindly until I get close enough to actually see the damn building, and then slowly looping around for another pass at the building until I finally destroy ass balls! The graphics suck so bad you can't see these huts unless you get at the point-blank range, and it's a crapshoot whether you can pull up in time without hitting the ground or another building and just dying instantly! This is the biggest problem with the game. A ton of the levels I've run into are built around bombing targets, destroying the land-based enemies, and the land-based weapons you have are so poorly programmed and designed that you don't have any effective means to destroy them. Every freaking time the game sends you to destroy buildings, it turns into a giant fustercluck as you loop around every target 5 times, firing everything at your target, trying to get something to fucking hit it! Here you see me trying to blow up a tank. I can't see the tank because it blends in with the ground, and no matter what I throw at it, nothing deals any damage. All because the rockets and missiles have 0 splash damage, and anything other than a direct hit doesn't even scratch the paint job. A direct hit on something I can't freaking see because it's so tiny. Oh, come on! Did it land a single hit? Constantly being forced to attack land-based enemies with no useful weapons would be bad enough, but because you have to get so damn close to these microscopic enemies to have any hope of finding good hits, you're constantly crashing into the ground, dying, and having to start these repetitive, infuriating missions over again. Over half the time I die, it's from crashing into the ground because this game forces you to play like a suicidal idiot! Sometimes I wonder if I'm playing wrong, like maybe you're supposed to fly above your target to line up a shot, but the clouds are so close to the ground that flying to any decent altitude means losing the entire level to a blanket of distance fog. I am playing the game correctly, and playing correctly means constantly being at risk of crashing. Top Gun Combat Zones fails because it's trying to be two completely different things. It's trying to be a quasi-realistic flight sim, but because they stole their level design from Rogue Squadron, a fantasy game with completely different mechanics and physics, the missions are not even close to being designed for a realistic flight sim. In Rogue Squadron games, fighting ground units is easy. You're slow enough to land a ton of hits in one flyby, you're nimble enough to easily fly and maneuver around in between ground enemies and terrain, the enemies are large enough that you can easily hit them, and your weapons actually hit their targets. Real planes have none of these advantages. You're way too fast and nowhere near maneuverable enough to engage the enemies at close range like you do in Rogue Squadron, which is why real-world air-to-surface combat is done exclusively through precision airstrikes. So things that are super easy to do in Rogue Squadron are titanic pains in the ass in Top Gun because they didn't realize there was a difference between the game they were ripping off and the game they were making. They put you in a sort of realistic aircraft and they keep assigning you things that realistic aircraft cannot do. Objectives that the game just isn't built for you to be able to complete. And because the devs completely failed to realize the game's mechanics didn't mesh together, you get thrown shitty ground combat bombing missions that are barely playable constantly. There are 6 Vietnam levels. The first 3 revolve around crappy bombing runs with a little bit of fighting helicopters thrown in. The 4th mission you're fighting a squadron of airplanes, and then the 5th and 6th levels are bombing runs again. The 5th level, you're explicitly told in the mission briefing that once the helicopters rescue the prisoners, you're supposed to escort them out of enemy airspace. But after the choppers rescue the prisoners, I follow the helicopters, and I basically just fly in giant circles for 5 minutes while absolutely nothing happens. And eventually time runs out and I fail the mission. Okay, prisoners got to the chopper, choppers got out, okay, what the hell else was I supposed to do? Well, it turns out the mission isn't considered complete unless you destroy the 3 prison camps, and they don't count the prison camps as being destroyed unless every single tiny building, every guard hut the size of one person, every storage room, every goddamn blade of grass has been bombed. So since I have no choice, I fly at the prison camp, fire at one building, hoping by sheer dumb luck I'll hit it, then fly in one giant, extremely slow circle to get another shot at said building, fire some more at it, hoping this time it will finally, son of a bitch! So do you see how this game could be, soul-crushingly boring as you do nothing but fly in giant circles, impotently shooting at stationary targets, left to dumb luck if you hit them or not, over and over and over for several minutes on end because it's the only way to beat the level. I should also point out this game's presentation and production value suck ass. I've already commented how the ground textures are so muddy they could pass for Nintendo 64 graphics, but the sound design is just miserable. There is pretty much zero audio or visual feedback when you take damage. Your plane gets riddled with bullets in complete silence, and you have to keep an eye on the damage percentage to know anything happened to you at all. The game doesn't even bother rendering the bombs when you use them. You just press B and something on the ground spontaneously explodes, often without an explosion sound effect. Even something like getting hit with the missile, which should be accompanied by an earth-shattering kaboom that rocks your entire world, maybe you'll hear a small poof. That's it.
Shot with a rocket and a head-on collision in near total silence.
The menus suck nards too. All you get for mission selection is a list of numbers with no clue what the mission is until the briefing after you've selected your plane and mission. So to replay a specific level, you just have to try and remember what number it is. You can press Z to do what the game calls your plane's special move, but all it does is make your plane turn sideways, and you can't turn while your plane is doing this. Seriously, all it does is lock up your controls for a few seconds. Why would they do that? In the second era, you're given a new plane, the Hornet, and the game makes sure to tell you that the Hornet is a hybrid fighter and bomber. I guess somebody in Top Gun finally went, maybe we should give a bomber to the guy we always send on bombing missions. However, because each level has a predetermined loadout, this hybrid bomber still carries the same ordnance as the Tomcat. They make you do another 5 training stages before you can start the second era's campaign, but at least the training levels have some actual variety to them. You're flying through canyons, popping choppers out of the sky. There's a massive dogfight where you have to kill 20 planes. It's made clear these exercises are all done with live ammunition, by the way. Care to think how many millions of dollars of taxpayer money I've wasted, and how many fellow American pilots I've put in the ground for the sake of training? Was dummy ammo too difficult to program? I know it's been a while since I've seen the movie, but I don't think they were actually shooting each other down. Questionable logic aside, these missions are actually fun. Funny what happens when you have planes do what planes are designed to do. But just when I finally start to enjoy myself, I get thrown into a battle with tanks where my missiles keep missing their damn targets! Die, you miserable, poorly rendered, rusted hunks of scrap! This is also where the game starts pulling a dirty trick on you. New enemies don't spawn on the edge of the map and then make their way forward. They magically teleport into the middle of the level, right on top of the building I need to defend! Shit! The second time period is the Persian Gulf War, and you start by blowing up enemy fortifications in a city. See, the briefing says that they can't send bombers because they would cause too many civilian casualties, so they send you in instead. Really, bombers would cause too many casualties. So your response is to send a jet fighter down to take out the enemy base by flying at ground level through a major population center where they are virtually guaranteed to crash into a building, bring it down World Trade Center style, killing thousands of people and still leaving the objective incomplete. And on the off chance the pilot does survive, he'll be dogfighting helicopters and taking out anti-aircraft weapons with hideously inaccurate warheads in the middle of a city where he's likely to miss and bring down another building. He's fighting anti-aircraft cannons that are on top of civilian buildings, and there are more enemies than equipped missiles, so the pilot will be forced to utilize the Gatling gun, assuring that he shreds a few dozen civilians with the crossfire. But bombers with precision-guided smart bombs on pinpoint targets would cause too many civilian casualties. Hey, Titus, this is the kind of mission that helicopters would be sent on, because helicopters, unlike jet fighters, are actually designed to do this kind of thing. Yeah, funny how that works. Anyway, the first Gulf level sends you out to destroy 45 enemy buildings. 45 buildings! With no weapons that are effective at destroying the buildings. It's like they're actively trying to piss you off at this point. Why are there so many bombing missions when the game isn't built for bombing missions? I swear, the hit detection in this game is so horrible. One time I got close enough to a building to see it in intricate detail. I actually watched my bullets pass right through the buildings without inflicting damage. Shit! It's bad enough this entire level is nothing but flying in circles, shooting at motionless targets, hoping eventually you'll land a hit. But I keep crashing into the damn buildings because the maneuvering sucks ass! I swear, this is the only flight sim in history where a slower plane is actually your better option. Oh, come on! Oh, what is with that? I hate this! The game is so badly programmed that the basic objectives are barely playable. Just please let my weapons actually work. God damn! I quit. That's it, I give up. I've had enough of this broken heap of mismatched gameplay mechanics. I know I'm not even halfway through the game, but if the rest of the game is going to be one barely functional, infuriating, repetitive bombing mission after another like the first era, then screw it! I was going to check an online walkthrough to see if the rest of the game is so intensive on broken-ass bombing missions after all, but shocker of shockers, there is no online walkthrough. Nobody's been dumb enough to suffer through this miserable shit heap and document the experience. I know that the third era is a hypothetical future war where countries are fighting at the North Pole for oil reserves, like Tom Clancy and Al Gore had a joint fever dream, but this game is so broken, I just don't have the patience to make it that far. Overall, the game feels like it was rushed through development to cash in on the Top Gun license before it expired, which would explain why 2 different publishers' names appear on the box. Some of the missions are fun, but not enough to make up for the vast multitude of levels that are broken on a fundamental design level. Screw this, I'ma go play Doom. And then I'm going to review something that rhymes with doom. Rhymes with chronic doom. Sounds kind of appropriate right now.